Greetings. You are about to listen to another episode of the Vernon Richard Show. Today, Keith Klain is the source of our discussion, the trigger for our discussion. He wrote at the time of recording yesterday a blog post where he talked about testing versus checking and how that is impact. What does that perspective, that lens, cause us to see and understand what is going on in the landscape of software development with all this AI stuff going around. It's a very long and, in our true style, sometimes rambly conversation about stuff. That said, we do cover some interesting points. We would love to hear what you think. We think you're going to enjoy it. There's lots of Keithisms. So if you like a good Keithism, this is the episode for you. Did I miss anything, Rich?
Nah, enjoy. We'd love to hear your thoughts, right? We're just two guys having a chat in public. We want to know how you're feeling about these topics and kind of where you think stuff's heading, because it is really interesting times.
So here's the episode. Enjoy it.
Hello, everybody.
Greetings.
Welcome to the Vernon Richard Show.
Hello. Whoop, whoop.
First things first, I am not in my office because my office is currently a balmy 29 degrees. So I'm downstairs. So I don't melt and my computer doesn't melt. So, yeah, welcome to my living room. How you doing, Ben?
Yeah, amazing.
So convincing, dude. Right.
Yeah,
I've got. There is one thing we need to talk about before we actually get into today's topic.
No, I know exactly what you're going to do, Bob Bradshaw. Absolutely not. You are predictable as any. No.
Just going to have a quick look at the Premier League table because just want to see who finished where. Looks like you got a number 5 next to your team, Vernon. Is that right? Looks like a number 5, and it looks like a number 3 next to my team.
Maybe it's the number of Champions Leagues we've got more than you. Maybe, I don't know. That was a desperate bit of head loss from me. Yes, we finished 5th. So what?
Right, football over. But yeah, World Cup soon. We don't care as much about the World Cup as I do about my own team.
Absolutely not.
Let's see what happens. So today's topic. Keith, what did you just say when we were discussing offline? Keithisms? What was your
Keithisms?
Keithisms.
I said
okay.
I referred to another Keithism.
Right. Well, we want to start by, there's been a couple of interesting, let's say, content been shared online. And we thought we'd discuss some of that because I found it interesting, and I've also been at a recent conference, and then just a general sense of where kind of the industry is maybe going, and go from there. So if you've not read Keith's blog, Keith Klain, friend of ours as well. How would you describe Keith on a testing front?
He is the disgruntled giver in Adam Grant parlance. He's the person who's like, this could be so much better if we weren't doing this list of silly things. And he's extremely blunt. That's the thing that I noticed the most about him, but it's coming from a place of concern and a belief that things can be better, and comes from a place of we need to cut the shit because all of this stuff is way too serious. So yeah,
I agree. Like, he's very blunt, very direct, but like usually backs it up with experience. Like, he's been in C-level roles in the quality testing space for the best part of 20 years at least. So like that's what I find interesting with. He's one of the very few that is active at that level. But
I mean, Keith will definitely correct us if we are wrong or if I am wrong, but he's either in the exec team. So the thing I like about Keith when it comes to the topics that we talk about, software development, software testing, software quality, is they can become quite philosophical debates.
Mm.
I'm prone to I love a philosophical debate. But the thing about Keith is that he, as far as I can see, is quite often in professional environments where, you know, that kind of talk is not going to go down well. It's like, okay, fine, whatever. But where's the money? You know what I mean? So he's either in an environment in a financial services situation, he's either on the exec team where you've got a board harassing you for, where's the results? Where's the results? He's either reporting into those people who only care about the results, or like his current role, he's in a consultancy, which if anyone's worked for a consultancy, it's billable days for the win. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
he takes the philosophical stuff and makes it practical in environments where the money has to be made. Like it's
Yeah.
really the focus of conversation. It's always the focus of conversation, which is probably going to come up at some point. But he is at the sharp end of the sharp end, I believe,
Yeah.
and that's why I love listening to his opinions on things.
So on his opinion, he published a blog.
Mm.
Well, I say recently, it was yesterday, when this was recorded anyway, saying checking isn't testing. Soon it won't be employment either. So the blog isn't about the debate of checking or testing, right? That is what it is, right? People still argue about whether that's right or wrong. It doesn't matter. But what I take from it is the way I view testing as, checking as like, you don't have to think about the answer, right? The requirement says if you do A and B, it's 12. So you do a test, A and B, and you get 12. Or you've seen the system do something, or someone has, and they've codified that into a test or a checklist or an automated test, and you're basically just you're just pushing buttons on the application and getting to see if you have the answer that someone's already told you is the answer, right? So that's my understanding, right? Is very little cognitive thought goes into that type of testing work, and some people call that side of it checking. That roughly align with how you think of the term?
Kind of. For me, designing the check is skillful work. Once you have the check, executing it and evaluating the results, it's not that there's zero skill, but there's less. But the key
I
thing
don't
is,
think.
for me, it resolves to like a true, false, pass, fail, 0, 1.
Yeah, I don't think there is much skill in designing some checks though. Like if you're in a very heavy document requirement place, like turning that requirement into the obvious, like people call it happy path, right? The obvious happy path, yeah, doesn't require a lot of skill at all, in my opinion. Like, whether that's turning it into a checklist or a written test case or an automated test, that some of these tests are blatantly obvious, right? The requirement says it should be A, therefore it should be A. Obviously, they can do more skill testing, like what do you mean by this? What is A? What does A look like? But some people don't do that, right? They just do A, and I don't think there is a lot of skill in that type of work.
Yeah, I'm not really thinking. I'm not including that. I'm thinking more broadly than that. But I know that's not
Okay,
what the debate is about. But I think there's ways to interpret and misinterpret something that is obvious written down.
right.
Test
Okay.
A. So I think, in order for you to figure out what checks you need to be able to do good testing. You need to be able to
Yeah.
explore, challenge, be curious, do all the critical thinking, sometimes lateral thinking, systems thinking. Is it
Okay.
always
Yeah.
A?
Yeah.
In what circumstances? So once you've gone through that effort to come up with, okay, this is the codified thing. Do these actions, and then if you do these actions, this is the result, and any other result from that is probably bad. 0, 1. Then you've kind of, what's the word? you've devolved the responsibility, or the no, that's not the right word. You've devolved the outcome to this algorithmic thing. And I think that is the thrust of Keith's most recent blog, right?
Yeah.
He's saying,
But
if that's the work
just
you're doing, well,
yeah, just to stay on the philosophical bit one more, like you just said there, like you used the word
oh,
good a
okay.
lot. Like, do you think the industry is good at that? Checking, designing the right checks, coming up with the right checks? Or do you think potentially a lot of the industry is doing how I just described it, like not really thinking critically or semi-critically, reading the ticket and designing almost literally just rewriting the ticket in different words to design a check? Like, what do you think feel you see more of?
I think I see more people taking things on face value that they see written down.
Hmm. Yeah, I think the same. And I'm seeing that more now in some of the conversations, which hopefully we'll get to after this, but around like the requirements for an AI agent, for example, right? That
Oh my god.
the face value, they take it as face value and like they can't test it because they don't know what it means, right? So like I think the industry, like we need to get right over here. I think a lot of people around here, the kind of you just described, good, can do critical thinking. What is A? When is A not A, etc. Right? And then I also think there's a lot of people here, face value, basically turning requirements into the same words just turned into a test case, and then basically manually or automatedly doing that type of test. But
Mm.
so Keith thinks, regardless of where we are on this scale, his argument is that AI is good enough at the moment and will only get better to do that work. It will introduce some risk. He's very clear that it ain't going to be the same, which I think is a great nuance because that's what people said about automation, right? People believed an automated test and a human running the same test with the same thing, and that was proved. It took a long time, but eventually, like, actually, I'm not sure everyone believes it anymore. Like, I don't think everyone's had that lesson yet, but most practitioners realize they're not the same. And I think at the moment, we need to make sure people know that message with AI. You're not going to get the same level of check-in, but it's going to be damn close. And if that's a risk you're happy with, maybe this is an avenue to go down. But then the rest of Keith's post talks about the financial side of some of these decisions, right? Because if the AI can now get close in some contexts, in some situations, I'm sure Maaike might be listening. I'm not saying everyone, Maaike. In some situations, it might be good enough. And if you're in one of those contexts and the cost of you versus the cost of a tool, and the tool is significantly cheaper, that company is going to think very seriously about swapping you for a tool. Because what's the what's the goal of the CEO?
Well, as I've been saying to everyone who's been listening, talking to me in the past month or three, the CEO has one job. That is to make the company profitable. That's it. They are on the hook for that. It doesn't matter what else they're doing. If they are not making the company profitable and meeting whatever targets they've been set, they will be fired. They will lose their
Yeah.
job. Good night, God bless. You're out of here. You know what I mean? And they have two levers to do that in my very, rudimentary understanding. They have a lever called control costs, and they have another lever called make profitable. Do you know what I mean? And they will pull one or both of those levers to one degree or another to make the line go in the right direction.
Yeah.
And what Keith is talking about is basically, it's not just about cost, it's about value. And so
Mm.
if your perceived value is deemed to be not worth it because you're doing the same work that Gen AI could do, then you will be deemed surplus to requirements. I think, if all you're seen to be doing is checking, then you you are more likely to be exited stage left. And the reason,
And
Keith, the reason why I'm setting like I'm listening to Keith on this is, like I said, he's at the sharp end, so he's seeing a lot of different contexts. I assume, could be wrong, but he's seeing a lot of different contexts because he's in the consultancy. He's seeing behind the scenes. He's looking under the
yeah,
covers, and this is the conclusion that he's coming to. He's like, "Hey, everyone, this
and
is dangerous."
and I think there's an interesting. I know we know a lot of different people listen to the pod, right? So I know what he means. Well, I think I know what he means when he says check-in, right? And other people may not be coming across that term, right? But the other right way to think about this is if people define your work and it almost comes across in a derogative way, as in Richard just does manual testing, right? They have a view of you which is probably not reality because you've not found the right words to explain the value that you bring. So it's not just like Keith's using the word checking to, basically translate to basic testing, low thought required, like I said, almost translating requirements into basic test cases, right? Very little critical thinking needed. Um, Other people in some companies may call that manual testing, right? I'm not having a pop at man. I believe manual testing is much more than that, but I've heard manual testing be referred to as this very basic, low hanging fruit, almost akin to what I would call check-in. So even if you don't align with Keith's words, the industry still has this second class citizen thing associated to testing and testers. And you need to quickly learn, I feel, if your company has that. Because if they do, and that's the belief, you need to quickly prove to them that you do far more than that. Or you need to quickly change the way you're working to show them that you do more than that. Because otherwise, I think they're going to put you in the same bracket as what Keith. And I don't think this is just related to testers. Again, I think if you're a developer just churning out code and you're not talking about the infrastructure, you're not pushing, you're not doing testing, you're literally just implementing features like not blindly, like just verbatim. That I would argue that job is at risk as well, right? So I think there's a couple of call to actions that come to my mind for the people listening. One is find out how the people that matter view the work you do or what they think you do. Because if they think you do very low hanging grade, very low cognitive load work, they may view you as, you know, AIable. Is AIable a word? It is now. um, but also, it will give you kind of, a better understanding of where you kind of fit in the way that things are going. Like, as you said, the CEO's job is to make money. And there is going to be a plethora of consultancies, tools coming onto the market, offering services and tooling that promise to, eliminate testers or, manual or checking or whatever, because that's exactly what happened with the automation tools.
Yeah, yeah. I don't disagree. This is something that I know I've personally been talking about for a good while. Keith is the first person that I ever heard discussing this topic, and he's been talking about it for I feel like it's about 10 years, and it's not going to go away. I think whatever line of work you're in, if you're listening to this and you're a tester or developer or an architect or a data scientist or whatever, it doesn't matter. You still have to devote some time to
Yeah.
demonstrating your credibility or building your credibility and demonstrating your effectiveness and all this kind of thing, because that is kind of the bottom line in this really weird environment that we find ourselves in 2026, where you've got ELTs making decisions based on their perception of your value.
You've, yeah. You've just given me not a segue into my talk because I don't think we're quite there yet, but I tweaked the AIT principles for the second delivery of the talk I just gave. And I don't know if you
Mm.
remember from the previous conversation, I had education over illusion. And that was
Mm.
kind of meant to be about what you spoke about, like their beliefs versus actually educating them. But I
Mm-hmm.
changed it to shared understanding over assumed understanding because
Mm.
I felt that was a bit more apt on kind of the conversations that I'm hearing and have people are having, that we need a collective understanding on what AI's role is, what the testing role is, what our ways of working is, what our goals are, instead of assuming that people think we're, I don't know, not needed or like testing's done
What?
this way or that way. So
How did you define it?
define what the
You know,
principle.
yeah. So what was it? What was it? It was shared understanding versus what?
Shared understanding over assumed understanding.
Yeah. What? Like, can you speak some more on that? Because I like the sound of
So
that.
my stance was more, again, it was based around AIT, so it's related to test automation, right? Automation and testing. And often there's an assumed belief that automated testing is A, right? Because in the industry it's viewed as being A. So test automation is simply automated testing, or test automation is playwright, right? That there
Mm-hmm.
will be an assumed, if you don't, let me try and rephrase it differently. If you don't try and generate that shared understanding on your first couple of weeks in that job, and you just kind of fall into line, you're almost assuming that there's a belief and an understanding of what test automation is. Just because they've been doing it well doesn't mean that they share the same assumptions and beliefs and observations as automation as you do. So the best
Mm-hmm.
thing to do is to make sure that's shared. So that could be simply asking people to define test automation or run a workshop on what it is, just so you know you're on the same page. If you assume they are and you start working in a certain way, how do you know you're doing valuable work or you're not kind of going against um kind of going against the grain, right? Which
Mm-hmm.
obviously also doesn't always align. So that was
Mm-hmm.
kind of my angle. Was it was specifically around automation. A lot of people assume it's UI, end to end, automated testing only, and I was like, no, it's tools, it's software that supports testing, it's automated testing on all the layers. I think developers should be writing automated tests as well, right? So I want to get, as soon as I join a team, I try and get all that out there so I can
Mm-hmm.
see what the kickback is and we can get a level playing field. But in my
Mm-hmm.
actual training, I would talk more about the context and testability, right? So usually I would do the 10 Ps, which would give me a lot of answers to the context. And one of those 10 Ps is philosophy. So what is the team's philosophy on testing or test automation? So I would obviously do it
Mm-hmm.
that way, but I know a lot of people don't. So that's why I changed the principle. But it was, I felt education was a bit like presumptive, like, it must join the team and educate them all. They're all wrong. Like every single one of them is wrong. Instead of actually, what do they think? What do I think? How do we find common ground, build from
Mm-hmm.
and work from? That was a long answer of probably not answering what you asked me. But anyway,
No, when I heard you say the phrase, that I liked it immediately. What I immediately thought of was pretty much what you described. Is I feel like I take a kind of consultative approach, or a coaching kind of approach, which is to say you try and look for the assumptions or the current, which is part of the current context. To kind of say, here's what your situation is right now. You're defining things like this, and you just show it back to them, just play it back to them, and the conversation kind of goes from there, uh, which moves it from assumed into shared, which I quite like. And I also
yeah,
like, and Keith mentioned it in, in his, I think he was taking shots at the term shift left. But that's what shift left is about. Shift left is about
another one.
taking
Yeah,
something that is assumed and saying, it would be better if all this testing stuff that we're talking about and doing over there, it'd be better if we surfaced it over here. Let's take it over here and surface it over there. So now the whole team understands where the risk is, what we're going to do to address that risk, and we can all move forward in unison, and it's going to be wonderful. So I quite like that principle, the way you frame that.
But that proves a really different point in the same conversation around checking here, right? And automation is the most common understanding or definition I hear for shift left is that instead of doing the test on the application, we do the test on the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which again, yes, that's an element of shift left, right? But to a lot of people I've met and stuff I've read, that is the whole of shift left, right? It is purely testing a requirement first instead of doing the first contact on the software or when you write test cases. And yes, that's true. But if that's not, well, you can do so much more, right? So again, I think that's another term that's heavily loaded and misunderstood, which not saying they will, but maybe the tools are going to come along for them next, maybe the tooling's going to come along and we don't need to test requirements with people anymore. We'll just send that to AI because people
How many
don't
topics are
know
you trying
what
to talk
we do.
about in one episode? God damn it!
But it's the same concept, though, right? If people don't know what you mean by those words or the work that you do, which is what Keith's getting at, right? A lot of people from externally, because we had the same conversation with automation, it will look like all they do is checking because all their output is test cases passed or failed or bugs, right? Because that's all they talk about. Because they don't talk about the thinking, they don't tell their testing story. So from the top looking down, there's some people that's all that they're not even assuming that's what they do. That is all you make it look like you do, right? And that is a concern when you're doing more, because you're not showcasing that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, what's the right way to describe it? There are a lot of things that you can do as an individual that will make this problem, that you can either amplify the problem or you can reduce it. And I think, I shameless plug, I will be talking about this at Agile Testing Days actually, and I actually wrote the credibility playbook on the same kind of topic, because there are lots of ways that you can undermine yourself, and there are lots of ways that you can hide the value that you're bringing. But the thing is, and I'll put links to all these different things in the show notes. But I think the point that Keith is making, right, is you think you're doing a good job because you're doing a lot of checking, but the value that is, the value that people perceive that with in the marketplace is changing, and it's changing for the worse. Like, it's going down in value. And if you do not understand that, it's going to be hard times ahead, probably, for you in your organization and in the marketplace. That's how I'm interpreting what he's saying. He's saying, look, I know you don't like this conversation because it seems a bit philosophical and impractical, and who really cares? Everybody cares now, right? Everybody cares now. They wouldn't use that terminology, but ultimately what we're talking about is your perceived value in the marketplace, in your organizations and in the marketplace. You and your skills and the impact that you're having has a perceived value, and it's constantly moving and changing. And with this technology being able to generate lots of things, it can generate lots of output. If you always communicate in terms of output, if you always communicate in terms of, I did this much stuff, if you always more operate like somebody who, I would call it being like an order taker. So when Rich talked about the requirement said test A, the requirement says I should do X, and it will produce A, then I'm going to do X and see if it produces A. If that's how you see the role, and that's how you communicate about the role, like 2026 is going to be very shit. It's going to be difficult.
Yeah. That's not to say, like, because again, Keith concludes it too, right? There is never been a need. So the solutions that we're now dealing with, and I'm part of the problem because I'm building them, right? They're probabilistic, non-deterministic by nature, right? There is no do A and B and get C, right? And now the people that do have the skills are the people that have pushed beyond what Keith would call check-in and what we would say is, basic testing. Applying that critical mindset, there is so much work for you because these systems need that level of testing. But if you're not communicating that you're doing it, and you're seen to be just doing some of that low hanging fruit, it's going to be tough for you as well. So you need to get better at sharing the kind of work you're doing. And then I think we've had chats of work. If you can now do some of that with AI woven into it, so that you can show, actually, look, I'm far more than what you think I am. And also, here's the value that I'm bringing. And oh, if you give me this AI tooling as well, I can add even more value because I can codify some of that into agents or skills, or I can use AI as a programming partner or a critical thinking partner to come up with ideas. Um, I think that's going to make 2016 a lot better for you, and also probably secure you for many years to come on the way the job market is going. Well, not the job market. I think where I view the industry going personally, like that's how I feel.
Yeah, man. I think as nerds, and this is again another projecty thing I would love to work on. It's like we need to get better at sales and marketing. That's what this is about. It's about the fundamental skills. Now, rightly or wrongly, or at least this is how I interpret articles like Keith's, is
Mm,
there is a demand for certain kind of skills. So I also saw today, I don't know when she wrote it, but Maaike did a blog post, but she was effectively saying, everybody wants me to use AI. And I refuse. Like, I just don't want to use it. I have very bloody good reasons that I arrived at that conclusion. And I have a lot of skills and I have a lot of impact and I have a verifiable track record of the impact that I have when I join teams. But all these
yeah,
people are doing is just demanding that I use these bloody tools, use this thing that I think is actual evil, right? So she doesn't even know if she wants to stay in this industry because of the, focus on AI is so maniacal and, myopic in a sense. Like it's tunnel vision.
yeah,
Like there's no other recognition that there's any other way to do the thing. There's no understanding that, oh, there's other impact that can be had, or there's a way of delivering the impact and the value without using these things, or in spite of these things, or filling the gaps that these things cannot even fill. And that's also going to be bloody difficult because everyone is I say everyone, I'm really talking about decision makers, owners, ELTs, and then by definition, us, like everybody else, is obsessed with this stuff.
yeah.
So it's just going to be, man, the rest of this year is going to be weird. Next year, I think, is going to be weird.
It's
Yeah.
I remember what's his name, um, John Cutler, when he talks about like
Mm.
what you build for a product, and he talks about it in the terms of bets. I think that's
Yeah.
essentially what people are having to do with some of their jobs at the moment. It's like, my opinion personally, I've read Micah's post, I understand her stance, but I think now it's become too big to fail. And I don't like the reasons why it became too big to fail, and I don't like the fact it is too big to fail. But it has almost become too big to fail. It's like electric cars is another one, right? Some people, oh, it's so good for the environment, when we all know it's not, right? maybe once you drive your car, it's good, but to make it in the first place almost did as much damage as a normal car, right? So I think the same. I feel certain things the same with AI, right? It's going to do a lot of damage, but it may also potentially do some good. I don't like the monopoly. I don't like how much is mostly tied to money or anything like that. But as an industry, I can't see it leaving. It's got too ingrained so quickly that I just can't see it disappearing. And I think you have two options. And I think personally, I think the people that embrace AI are probably going to have more job opportunities than those that don't. Doesn't mean there won't be any work. There will always be work, but probably not as much. But I hope I'm wrong because I think the world
See, it
might be
depends what
better
you
if
mean.
we're not
See,
boiling the oceans. But we'll see.
well, maybe it's off topic, or maybe it's slap bang on topic. But it depends what you mean by too big to fail. Because the last time I heard that phrase was in the 2008 banking crisis, and what I think it might have meant is that governments bailed out certain companies and certain industries. Is that what you mean, or is it something else? Because I
I mean
think,
that
go on.
I mean that governments, companies have invested too much money in it. Banks, there's too much money invested in it for it to fail. If the AI boom, if it goes pop, right, all that money gone is then going to have to be found, and then it will be found by other ways, right? Which will
Hmm.
eventually, the general public always end up paying it, right? I'm not like I'm not a politician or anything like this, right? We always end up paying in some way, but I just think at the moment the banks have got too much money in it. Individuals, wealthy people, governments have there's too well again use the word bets. There's too many bets on it working, right? People firing, and again all the redundancies. I think I agree with. I can't remember the guy's name, but these companies are using AI as an excuse to reduce their headcount,
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Some of the companies got too big. They realized they were too big. They couldn't think of a legitimate way to reduce their
Simon
headcount.
Wardley, maybe, I don't know.
Maybe AI comes along. It's a very legitimate reason that people believe. A lot of people believe
Mm.
it. Um,
Hmm.
and whether right or wrong, it in some cases it is a belief that might work. But even if it doesn't work, they don't care because they'll just learn to operate smoother. But yeah, my too big to fail comment is purely the amount of money invested in it, the amount of money invested in the data centers, the amount of money to make the whole AI ecosystem work is just so much money that they will push so hard to make it work, even if it doesn't. Um,
I think, yeah. So that's. I feel like that's going outside of my area of expertise a little bit, but I feel like I would like to explore the definition of that even more, because I feel like one possibility is I don't think it is too big to fail. It's like, so, and apologies in advance, non-football fans, but in the English Premier League and maybe other big leagues around Europe for sure, there's a similar phrase where you say, "Oh, that club is too big to go down," and what you could interpret that to mean is they like it's not possible for them to go down, and I don't think that's true. It's just the consequences will be so catastrophic if they go down. And that's what I think about with AI. It's like it can totally fail. The consequences will be fucking horrendous
that's what I
because of
tried to
the
say
amount
by
of
the fact
money.
we pay anyway, right? So yeah, that's kind
And
of what I meant. Yeah,
the but the other thing is when you look at look at AI from an ethical point of view, it will also be catastrophic if it works. Do you know what I mean? In some way, shape, or form, because of all the the environmental issues, the societal issues,
yeah, governance,
etc., etc., etc. Like, there's a lot
but
of reasons
so
why
much.
it will fail. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Regardless of if it succeeds or not. So But like I say, that's something that I'm
Yeah,
still trying to
I don't
learn
know
about
either.
right now.
But I think going back to what Keith said though, again, that there's a lot of money being pumped into it, right? So
There is.
regardless of what happens to AI, specifically in the testing space, there is a lot of money being pumped into
There
tooling
is.
designed to do low-hanging testing, right? Not even low-hanging, that's how I view it, but they're selling it as an augmented tester,
This is
a,
the
a
point I was going
replacement
to make.
tester. So that's
This is the point I was
the
going to
money's
make as well.
coming in.
The marketing machine is in full effect,
Oh yeah,
which is why we, as practitioners, need to get our individual marketing machines also going. Because the people who decide who is employed at a given company, those vendors are targeting those people with
Mm,
hideous effectiveness. Like we've seen this already
yeah,
with GUI automation tools. Creates a lot of noise, it creates a lot of turbulence, and it's already happening. And it will be well, what I was thinking is it could be difficult to overcome that, which is why you just need to think of it instead of trying to change the whole industry. Just think about it from your personal point of view in the company that
so,
you're in, with the teams that you work with, and just in that little microcosm of the market, you need to make sure that your personal or departmental or from your guild, if you like, their marketing department is on point. So you got to talk about your wins. You got to generate some wins. You got to talk about your expertise. You got to instead of talking about how wonderful the tool is, talk about how wonderful your use of the tool is.
yeah,
Keep yourself central to everything, not in a dishonest way. Like say, no, the reason, like I am the expert, and the reason I am the expert is because I've done these things, and these things have this impact, and that impacts this thing that you really care about. Like you need to be able to connect those dots and not assume that people are looking to connect those dots, because the decision makers are also human. They're also under pressure. Believe it or not, some of those people do have mortgages, and they're just as stressed as we are. I'm not asking you to be. This is not a plea to sympathize with these people, or even unempathize. I think that wouldn't be a bad thing, but I'm just saying you need to understand the context that these people are coming at this situation from. That's the only reason I'm bringing it up.
yeah, I agree. I think like you hit the nail on the head. You've got to be going back to the start of this blog post and this episode, right? You've got to be showing that value. You've then got to be looking at what, as you said, the people upstairs, the C-level people are discussing, talking, what they're saying to you, trying to read between the lines, but then also showcasing the value you're bringing. And if you happen to be using some of the things that the CEO, etc., is raving about, make it very clear that you're using them. It was the guy, and we need to find the blog post. I'll have to find it for you afterwards. I don't know if you saw it. It was like, what's the word? Like a satire YouTube video, but also kind of not, where the guy was like, if you want to stay unemployed right now, right, you have to become the insufferable AI person in your company. Do nothing but talk about AI. Every time you use it, talk about it. Like, just tell everyone. You get on Slack, channel everyone. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Look at my AI. It's like that is going to keep you That's going to keep you employed. Like, become the expert. Even if you're not the expert, just act like the expert, because no one has a fucking clue what they're doing anyway. Right? That was his whole message. Right? It's much more better delivered, but I think you need to do that on a certain level, right? You definitely need to be shouting about the value, and you definitely, if you have a CEO or a direct manager at the moment that is talking to you extensively about the use of AI and pushing it on you and encouraging you to use it, there is a reason they're doing that, and that reason is probably because someone's mentioned saving money or increasing profits or doing something because they have an assumption or a belief or an understanding that AI can help, and that's being passed down to you, and you need to acknowledge that and do something about it.
Yeah, I agree
And
with.
it is raining, Vernon. It's raining AI all over our industry. Right.
Yeah, it is. It is, man. What does what I'm trying to? I've got Keith's post open here. I'm trying to read it and listen at the same time. Like, what does he say people should do? Is he?
He basically says you need to shift into the what we would define as testing space, right? So in his distinction of checking and testing, you need to move back into the testing space, critical thinking, system, critical thinking, system thinking. These agents and these AI tools, like, we need to prove that they work or don't work. And you can't do that with
Okay.
simple A plus B equals C. So his argument is testing is needed more than ever, but the checking side of it is not. So if you're only doing checking, he thinks your employment days are coming to an end. But if you're doing good testing, and he doesn't really define it, but if you're doing testing, these models need testing, and they need testing extensively. And the people with the most experience outside of AI specialists is testers. So that's kind of his call to action from my stance. He says it at the end somewhere.
Yeah, he talks about RST being the way forward.
Yeah, this bit here. The irony of all this is that this should have been the tester's time to shine. Like, who is
I think
better
it still
placed to
is, though.
test complex systems than unpredictable, that depend on data, that interact with people, that have varied output, that degrade over time, and who puts them into context? It's testers. We are the investigators, the system thinkers, the people that understand risk. And I think it is our time to do that. But back to my talk, conversations I had at Tesco's, where I've just been.
Mm.
I need to find a picture, but I asked people, like, why do you come up with the tests you come up with? And I must have got 30, 40 answers, and not one of them said risk, right? Not one person said risk. And I think now, with the complexity of these systems, this, not going back to fundamentals, me and you have spoken about, right? Risk-based testing. But then I think that's part crucial. But another thing that I'm generally am concerned about is there's a technical, I believe there's a higher technical knowledge requirement. I can't think of the right word. That's terrible. You need to be more technical to test these systems than a lot of our industry is. We're very used to testing microservices, this kind of thing, right? But not the internals of an LLM, because, God knows how all that works, right? But just more the technical mapping of how a decision on the LLM at this step could cause 5 steps down the line to behave differently, because there is no right or wrongs. But then also, once you've got that technical knowledge, I think almost a bit like checking, but like, how can you then design deterministic checks in guardrails? Again, guardrails is a fancy term for an automated check, in my opinion, in some cases. But how can you weave them into your system now? So we don't know that an email summary, we don't know it's good, right? But we know it should be less than 200 characters. We know it shouldn't contain any of these 10 words. We know it shouldn't do this. So as the AI spits out, we can still evaluate it before it goes to the next step. But we're not evaluating that it's a good summary. We're evaluating that it has the characteristics of what might make a good summary. And that requires knowing how the system works and how it's architected to put those types of testing, checks, and guardrails in place. And I, at the moment, personally, I don't think there's enough knowledge around that in our sector. And I don't have it myself. I'm working on them now, and there's massive gaps in my skill set that are being identified by working on these agents.
Vidya Ranganathan. talked about this, or at least I believe that's what you're talking about. So there's different flavors of risk, different kinds of risk. There's the inner loop, which is the internal quality of the thing. And then there's the external quality, the perspective from outside of the system, if you like, the customer perspective or the user's perspective, let's say, which may be users. It could be your support team. It could be the people on, PagerDuty, whatever. And they're two different kinds of risk. So when you talk about testing the guardrails that are quite deterministic, that's cool. We should definitely do that. But there's also work to be done, like you said, in terms of, well, is the summary any good? What does any good even mean? How are we going to define that? How would we know that it isn't any good, that it was bad? How do we do that? So all of that, these are all risks that need to be catered for. There's like an inner loop and an outer loop. The article is sick and it's got some good references. So I'll put that in the show notes for goddamn sure.
Well,
I think that's what that's talking about.
Yeah. And here's a good example of one of the agents that I'm working on, right? So without giving it all away, we have this summary that gets built, right?
Please don't get fired.
So we have this summary, and this summary has information in it, right? Now, that summary was initially designed for a human to read, right? To quickly understand the case. But as the system grew, that same summary now is used as input to other AI parts of the flow who come up with things like priority and severity and issues. But originally, it might not have been designed or thought about for that use case. It was only designed to be read by a human. And I think that is one of the emerging risks that Keith talks about in his system. The risk of regression or rolling back or weird behavior has never been more crucial to understand and test. But if you don't have that technical mindset and understand how data and output and things flow through your system, you are not going to be able to design those types of tests. And it's going to become, as you mentioned, the risk of that going wrong, who knows? Because normally we're used to data being data, as in, whatever it is, right? The value we give is deterministic, and we know what that value means. Whereas now we've got sentences and paragraphs and all sorts of weightings and other things that just it's not how we used to build software, and it changes what we need to do and how we think.
I was desperately trying to scramble because it's something that I've been looking into for purposes of the day job and there's things I'm learning on, so I can talk about them on blog. But this is what you're describing is what I meant by the risk changes, if you like. So I couldn't find the term, but it's like the error that so an agent has a goal, and it's going to have multiple steps between once you set it off and running, or it's triggered, or called or invoked, whatever, right? And then it will achieve the goal in whatever manner it can. And an error at the start propagates through the rest of the task completion. That's, how do you begin to manage that from a testing and quality perspective? Like, how would you even know that problem happened, and how would you detect it at the end if you're just looking at output? It's going to be very difficult. And I think that's the challenge with these systems. If you're looking at it from a checking only point of view, you're really bad. You're really, really going to fail because it doesn't lend itself to that kind of work anyway. But if you're coming at it from this perspective of curiosity, it's like, what do I need to know about this system before it goes into production? It's like the art. No one talks about Fight Club. First rule of Fight Club: don't talk about Fight Club. You don't have to talk about testing, but you can say, what do we as a team and or organization want to know about this thing before it gets in front of a customer? And that will kick off the whole conversation. And some of that stuff is going to lend itself to deterministic work, and some of it is going to have to be address the non-deterministic nature of the work. And if you have no curiosity, if a requirement says if you take steps X, Y, and Z, then A happens. If you just go, well, I'm just going to do X, Y, and Z, and you've got no more curiosity about it, good luck with your endeavors, is what I
Yeah.
shall say to that.
And I
But
think
it's
they're
easier said than done. There's going to be a lot of studying and research. And, to come back to your point about being technical, I think we have to do a certain amount of learning about this technology so that we have an idea of how to deal with it.
yeah. That was going to be my conclusion. Like the AI specialists on my project, like they're one of the gaps that we've highlighted that I have is I'm very used to being able to say that when I do A, B, and C, the system behaves like it works. When I did D,
Mm.
the system didn't work, right? And that's
Mhm.
usually very much right or wrong, pass or fail, right? But now in
Mm.
this world, to prove that it works, most likely you need a number, which means you need to be good at statistics and
Mm.
things like this, which I'm not, right? So we now need to get to a point where, we love talking about automation. I've got thousands of UI tests, right? In order to do
Mhm.
the AI stuff, you're going to have to do tens of thousands of permutations, like depending on what the model is or what the
Mhm.
context is, to come up
Yeah.
with 92% of the time it works. And that might
Mhm.
be as good as it gets. And
Mhm.
like you need to communicate that with evidence, with numbers, with reports. You might have to use other models. Like I've been learning a lot about well, not a lot, I've been researching sites like Hugging Face, where you can get models
Mm.
that people have trained. We're gonna have to
Mhm.
get comfortable using them to, be like, is this a good email? Is this a good this? Because people have written models to evaluate emails. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like, you might be in nuances in your context about what a good email is, but people have built
It's
and trained models that we can use. And
s-
the output of these models is numbers. So it's all like it comes back to math and statistics and stuff. And there's massive gaps in my own knowledge that I want to fill. Um, and that makes me excited. They can tell I'm excited. It makes me excited about where the
Mhm.
industry is going in some aspects. Um, but at the same time, obviously, there's a lot of change, so we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, I went off on a massive tangent. Don't know why, but it happened. So
it's the same shit, different day. I think it's the same as looking for an extension for your browser. It's like, well, if I know what I want it to do and I know where the marketplace for browser extensions is, I can just go and look for a browser extension.
yeah, but to
If
to
there's a
end on a
third
key,
party tool, then it's like, oh, I know what I want the tool to do, so let me just go and look. It's the same. It's like, oh, I know what I want this agent to do. I know what model I need to leverage. Let me just go and find a marketplace to go and see if someone's already written it. It's the to me it feels like it's the same high level abstracted out behaviors. It's now being applied in a slightly different
yeah,
domain. That's what it feels like. And to your point, because we've had this conversation a little bit on the podcast and a lot outside of the podcast. You've made the point to me, hey Vern, you're actually quite technical because you're able to say, oh, I need something to do X, Y, and Z. And I can go and find something to do X, Y, and Z, or I can talk to my developer colleagues and say, I need something that does X, Y, and Z. That's technical skill.
mhm,
Many of my friends and colleagues have, told me off, encouraged me, same spectrum, that I'm actually quite technical. And I think now what that means in this situation where we've got this thing called Gen AI, it's going to change a little bit, but to your point, it's still a requirement. It's not, I say a requirement, it might be less mandatory, but if you are technical, you'll be able to leverage these things quite a lot more than somebody who isn't, I think, because you'll be able
yeah,
to have an idea why something is failing or not working or not quite correct or whatever. So I think you're right about that.
I think the last kind of, I don't know, like positive call to action for me, and like a key, what was the word you said? Keithism? Was it
The
Keithism? I keep
Keithism,
forgetting this.
Keithism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Keithism. So me and Keith had a moment in agile testing days, right? Because another thing that I feel with all of this is I still don't think we, the testing community, know how to do this very well yet. I don't think there's enough blogs, training, content coming out from us on how to do this well. And it because it's not a solved problem 100% right, but the AI people and the data people, they've done a lot of this work already, right? It's nothing new to them. It's just become thrust upon us at a rapid rate because everyone started putting AI into their ways of working and into their systems. So I think we need
Yeah.
to really step up kind of how we're talking about it, because the official training that has come out so far and the official work around this space is weak. Like that, and I'll be blunt, right? It is weak. ISTQB's stuff on the back of this, weak, right? I read the syllabus about 6 months ago before I did this project. I am doing nothing. Sorry, I'm doing 20% of what they shared. Sorry, 20% of what I'm doing is 100% of what they said we needed to do. There is so much gap
I love
in
that.
yeah, like it's crazy. So I think again, there's big call to act. We need to start reading and learning this and sharing it, because I think that
Oh,
we need to
ISTQB.
start talking about all this, right? Because people are doing it, but we need to start sharing more. Stop talking about a lot of the lessons that we've learned from the past. Yes, they're important. Yes, we need to bring the fundamentals back into the forefront, but there's a lot of new work to be done and new stuff to be shared, specifically in some of this space, I feel. And I need to do that as a call to action to myself, but also to other people.
Yeah, me too. I've had a pretty rough couple of months, but got some more things to share on my newsletter. I think there are people like Keith and others who are sharing interesting thoughts on this topic from whichever perspective they're coming at it from, whether it's, people who love AI, or people who hate AI, or people who are mixed, all the spectrum. I think that's the point. I think hey Ralph. It's like the Wild West. It reminds me of when Agile was the new hotness. It reminds me of when Cloud or Selenium or whatever was the new hotness. It's like everyone's trying to figure out and scramble and decide what are the good practices, what are the best practices, what are the things that are emerging that make sense to do, what are the considerations of factors, all the rest of it. It was still super early, man. So it's
those
fun
things,
from that
those
point of view.
things, those things had a long-lasting impact on the way we work, the way we learn, and the way we build software. And it feels the
Hmm.
same again, right? So again,
Yeah.
to say the same things we've been saying, right? It's not going away, and I think it is going to stay. And it's the same as you just said around agile, cloud, DevOps, um, these other movements that we've had. This feels like another one, and we're more than capable of dealing with it by far. Like personally, I think we are. If you've been a very strong testing focused person with strong technical skills and a bonus coding skills, you have never been more desirable. Like, just to wrap on a silly question, because I want to ask other people. Me and you had a brief chat about it, right? Forward deployed engineers, right, are apparently the
Yeah.
buzzword job title. A
Yep.
customer facing developer or customer facing engineer, aka a QE, right?
Product engineer, I think is another one. Is it product?
So
Anyway, go on, carry
anyway, that's it. I'm gonna stop talking, right? Give us your thoughts, right? Because this topic, like it gets people going, and it feels so relevant and so on point, and I think there's so many opinions and varied and experiences that,
Oh my
and I
god.
want to hear more. I want to hear more from other people because We are
we
in really interesting times, like, and
we d-
good and
we
bad.
didn't we didn't we didn't talk about, maybe we'll do it in the next week. We didn't talk about the LinkedIn post that you shared, a
Yeah,
LinkedIn
exactly.
post with me.
Yeah,
The last time that I looked at it, it was, you'd just written it, and then now it's got a lot of engagement. Maybe we should talk about it next week.
absolutely. Yeah, we will do. Yeah. So let us know
Yeah,
what you
so you
think
heard the
about
man.
kind of.
Get in touch. Yeah, get in touch. Let us know what you think. Did we miss anything? Is there anything that we haven't considered? Is there anything you really agree with or really disagree with? Please let us know. We appreciate all the comments and all the interaction and the feedback that we get about from the episode. So, we'd love to hear what you think about what we just talked about.
Absolutely. All right. Goodbye.
Goodbye.